Perth's name derived from its situation at the mouth of the Tay. It was called Abertha, which in turn became Bertha when the Romans arrived and built a fort 2 miles to the north of the town. Bertha eventually became the present-day Perth. Perth is sometimes known as St Johnston, which was anglicised from St John's Town. This refers to St John's Kirk, dedicated to John the Baptist. The local football team is still called St Johnston. The proud spire of St John's Kirk, soaring over the city, is the only visible reminder of Perth's illustrious medieval past. The church was consecrated in 1243, although much of the building dates from the 15th century. John Knox went straight to Perth after his long exile on the continent ended in 1599 and preached his first rousing sermon at St John's Kirk, which survived the riots which ensued. But the monasteries of Blackfriars, Greyfriars and Charterhouse did not, and the Reformation in Scotland had begun. The Ferguson Gallery is just around the corner, housed in an attractive former waterworks dating from 1832, situated near the river in Marshall Place at the junction with Tay Street. It celebrates the work of J.D. Ferguson, who is recognised as one of the leading figures in the development of 20th century Scottish art. Born in 1874 in Leith of Highland parents, Ferguson spent much of his life in France, where contact with French Impressionists and Post-Impressionists is reflected in many of his bold, colourful paintings on display. Perth and Kinross Council run the gallery and admission is free. Royalists held the city from 1644. But the bubonic plague seemed to travel north with the Roundheads, and in the late 1640s both arrived in Perth. Up to 3,000 died, nearly 40% of the population, and corpses lay rotting in the streets. A few years later, Charles II was trying to rally Scots support against Cromwell, and revived a tradition by having himself crowned at Scone on New Year's Day 1651. Perth fell to Cromwell 8 months later. It was only after a further 9 years of exile and the death of Cromwell that Charles became king in fact as well as name. At the head of George Street is the Perth Museum and Art Gallery, which has been collecting since 1784 and must be one of the most impressive provincial museums in Scotland. It summarises all the periods and events we discover throughout Highland Perthshire and Perth and Kinross, bringing the history alive. With free entry, this is a must for visitors. One of Perth's most noted sons is John Buchan, author and statesman. Although he pursued a political career culminating as Governor-General of Canada and was to become Lord Tweedsmuir, Buchan is noted for his thrilling novels, the most famous being The 39 Steps. The Perthshire Tourist Board's head office and information centre is situated at Lower City Mills. Here the full range of information and advice is available and accommodation can be reserved. This former barley and oatmeal mill dates from 1805. Indeed, milling dates back to the 12th century in Perth. The town lade draws water from the River Almond 4 miles away and was used both to power the mills and feed the ditch that once surrounded the medieval town walls. Perth is known throughout the world as the Fair City as a result of Sir Walter Scott's romantic historical novel The Fair Maid of Perth, published in 1828. Set in the city at the close of the 14th century, a fictionalised version of the intrigue and feuding in the court of Robert III to win the hand of Catherine Glover, the Fair Maid, ending in the Battle of the North Inch in 1396 between clans Catton and Whale, which was fought when sides were picked as in a football match, and 30 men on each side fought to the death. The centre of Perth is flanked by 2 large parkland areas known as the North and South Inches, and this is the reason behind Perth being known as the smallest city in the world, because it was built between 2 inches. Nearby, on the banks of the Tay at North Inch Park, is Balhousie Castle, which was passed to the Hay family in 1625, with Victorian additions added in 1863. It's now the Regimental Museum of the Black Watch. Formed in 1725, the regiment fought its first battle at Flanders in 1745 under the overall command of the Duke of Cumberland, who months later commanded the government troops at Culloden, in which the Jacobite cause was laid to rest. 11 years later they fought in North America alongside the Red Indians, who regarded them as distant relations, and also a few years later in the American Wars of Independence. In the Battle of Quatre Bras, 2 days before Waterloo, they saw action, and had this hard-fought battle not been won, there would have been no Waterloo. The First World War saw 8,000 Black Watch perish, and on Armistice Day on the 11th of November, the Black Watch advanced across the very field of Fontenoy at Flanders, where 173 years earlier the regiment had first seen action. Although it is technically not a city, locals cite the Golden Charter granted by King James VI in 1600 when he describes Perth as a free city and a regal and royal borough. James VI nearly suffered the same ending as James I, but survived, saved by Sir David Murray, who, as his reward, was given the lands of Scone in 1604, and created Lord Scone and later Viscount Stormont, and whose descendants were to build the palace that stands today. Join the new bypass heading south and take the first exit off to Crieff, passing Huntingtower Castle, which is under the care of Historic Scotland and was formerly owned by the Riven family, who held James VI captive at the castle for 10 months. Its fine painted ceilings are especially noteworthy. Continue on to Crieff, passing Methven Castle, dating from 1664 and now restored and the home of an architectural practice.